All right, so that basically concludes the introduction to JSPsych workshop. I hope it was helpful for you and give you a better understanding of what JSPsych looks like, how it works, and how you can maybe apply that towards your own interests, towards your own experiments. I'm really hoping that this workshop can serve sort of like as a starting point that you can build off of for the purposes of your own projects and experiments. In terms of just a quick review for what we did today is we learned how to set up a JSPsych script in Visual Studio Code. We focused on building one experimental trial using that welcome message experimental trial. And that's kind of where we got our first glimpse at integrating JavaScript, HTML, and CSS languages, like customize the font color, for example. Then we built the full experiment, right? We used JSPsych's timeline variables to be able to loop through the stimuli that we wanted to present in the stimuli presentation trials. And then we also kind of extended that for the memory test experimental trials. And we used the phase 1 and the phase 2 procedures. So it shows you how you can kind of loop through different experimental trials. We also worked with a bunch of different plugins to give you a better taste of what JSPsych can do and how those plugins typically work. So again, hope this has been helpful and this is something you can extend for the purposes of your own projects and experiments. But one thing that I wanted to provide a space for is I know a lot of people are interested in JSPsych because of its compatibility with Pavlovian online experiments. So again, a huge benefit of JSPsych is that online experiments run in JavaScript through web browsers and load onto people's web pages. So in order to convert your local experiment, which is like saved on your computer, to an online experiment, which can run anywhere, you need to make a few minor tweaks to your script. So the first thing that you have to do is change the pathways to load the plugins. Like for example, my plugins are all stored in like users, my temple ID, desktop, the JSPsych workshop folder, blah, blah, blah. And in an online space, like those pathways don't exist, right? So you have to change the pathways to make them more compatible so that Pavlovia knows where to pull the plugins from. And I include a screenshot in the next slide that will go through that. Another thing that you're going to have to do is add 2 plugins that will connect your script to Pavlovia. Pavlovia is basically this online repository that hosts your scripts. And from Pavlovia, you can then run the scripts online on different people's computers and web browsers. And in order to be able to connect your JSPsych script to Pavlovia, you need to add in this JSPsych 7 Pavlovia plugin, which all it does is it establishes and terminates the connection with Pavlovia. So all you do with this plugin is at the beginning of your script, you create a trial that basically turns this connection on with Pavlovia. And at the end of the script, you create another variable, another trial that just terminates the connection with Pavlovia. That's pretty much it. Then this jQuery plugin just works with the JSPsych 7 Pavlovia plugin to establish that Pavlovia connection. The last thing that you'll want to do, it's super recommended. It's not like necessary, like your task would work without this, but it's definitely recommended to add a plugin which loads the image files like prior to running the experiment so it avoids timing issues with any images or any media files that you want to present. Like you can imagine a world where the images may take longer to load on different people's computers based on like bandwidth and any other sort of, computer specific dimensions. But this JSPsych preload plugin kind of automatically loads image files prior to the start of the experiment. So super helpful. It's definitely a recommended way to kind of avoid any lagging issues with the presentation of like images or videos or stuff like that. So the online version of our experiment, like I said, I provided this index.html file, which is just the online version of our experiment that we built today. This is what my kind of GitLab Pavlovia environment looks like for the purposes of this experiment. Like I said, maybe it'd be helpful to cover this in like a future workshop, but I kind of wanted to focus on just JSPsych software for the purposes of this workshop. But basically all I have is a JSPsych folder, which has all the plugins, a stimuli folder, which has the images that we went through, and then my script, the index.html file. This ds_store file is something that is automatically generated once you upload a script online onto GitLab. So really quickly, on the left side, you can see that I'm changing the plugin pathways to match what I have, how I have my environment set up in the previous slide. So if you see, I have it going from JSPsych /this/the plugin. So that Pavlovia knows all it has to do is go into JSPsych, the next folder will be dist, and then the next folder will be all the plugins. Then I'm also adding the two required plugins that I talked about earlier, the jQuery plugin and the JSPsych 7-Pavlovia plugin. I'm just adding that and highlighting that with the green square so that you can see that we added that in. And then again, kind of emphasizing what this JSPsych-7-Pavlovia plugin does is at the beginning of the script, I'm creating a variable called Pavlovia init, or init, whatever you want to call that. It's just establishing the connection with Pavlovia. And then at the end of my script, I'm ending the connection with Pavlovia. I'm just turning that off. And if you look at the index.html file, you can see more specifically where I located that in the script. So these are basically the two more important things that you'll want to do in order to convert your local script to an online script. And then this is a slide for preloading the media files. Again, since the images are being pulled from Pavlovia onto different people's web browsers, you just want to make sure that there's no issues with Stimuli presentation, right? It'd be super annoying if some images took 5 seconds to load while all their images loaded right away, and this preload plugin helps out with exactly that. It'll just load those files right away. So all I'm doing is I'm creating an array that has all the image files that I want to show for the purposes of our experiment. I'm including that in a variable called image_files. Then I'm using the preload plugin to load the image files, and I'm just pushing that to the timeline. So in other words, all I'm saying is right away, let's load those files right from the beginning. That way we don't have to worry about any timing issues. If anyone has any questions about if anyone wants to move forward with really using JSPsych to run online experiments, I'd be happy to chat about that. Feel free to reach out to me whenever. And just in conclusion, some general notes. Yale Niv's lab at Princeton has a super helpful task repository, which also includes tutorials. I definitely recommend checking it out. Winston Yang also has a great YouTube series for JSPsych tutorials. This is something that I worked through myself when I was first learning JSPsych. Just a quick caveat, though, that most JSPsych tutorials use an older version of JSPsych 6.0, which uses kind of a different syntax structure for calling plugins compared to JSPsych 7 and above, which is kind of not great, to be honest. But once you're able to understand how it differs, it's still a helpful resource to work through. Scrimba has a really helpful but pretty long base JavaScript tutorial that does a pretty good job of instructing new users on how to integrate JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. I feel like a lot of the JSPsych tutorials focus on JavaScript or HTML or CSS independently, and I personally just wanted to get a better feel for how to use those from a more integrative standpoint. So maybe if you really want to, but I don't think you'd have to use the Scrimba tutorial to learn JSPsych. And then I'm just linking the JSPsych discussion forum. Again, I've asked some truly asinine questions on there and no one's judged me. So don't be shy to post on there and get some feedback. Everyone's super, super kind and understanding. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. I'm happy to be a resource moving forward if anyone has questions about JSPsych or just wants to chat about an online experiment in that context. I'd be happy to talk about that. Thanks so much, everyone.